my wife and I we're here, we're helping out. He needs the help. He's at that age where, can he live alone, or is it, or does he need to be surrounded? We're kind of in that window where we've just been here for the past 2 months, kind of gathering data, and helping out. And I'm, releasing an album and shooting music videos. And the beautiful thing is that with technology, I've been able to do all of it kind of from here, or most of it. I was color correcting a video a week ago, just sitting here, was chatting with the crew in LA, in the studio, and was able to just, stare at both my phone and my computer screen, and we were making adjustments as we went. And the other part is I co-directed a video from here. They were able to get me live feed of the footage they were getting up in LA, and it was incredible, and it was a great experience. But yeah, so hence here we are. I'm in my father-in-law's truck, and my laptop is on a table on the patio, and it's working. So, hey.
I'm shocked. Yeah, and I'm glad that you painted that picture, because we're not using the video, but I'm currently staring at a wheel well. where your face should be. I'm just looking at a tire of this white truck right now.
Oh, that's hilarious. I should actually give me 1 second. This will be.
Oh no, it's fine. It's
I'm going to point you towards the yard. It's actually quite lovely. It'll be a better image for you to stare at. This is great content. Great content. Let's see here.
There we go.
Better, right? Some trees.
Yeah.
That's what Alpine, California looks like.
Wow. Look at that.
East County, San Diego. About 45 minutes east from San Diego.
More context is that the reason why you are in the truck right now is because it sounds like minutes before you signed on, everybody fired up their yard tools at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, I kind of came up with this plan yesterday because my wife has the one room in this house that has a door on it and is fairly quiet and away from all the noise, but that's her office. So whenever I need to have either a conversation with someone or a meeting or anything, I have to kind of figure it out because my area is the basement. However, there's no door, so everyone can hear everything I do and say, and it can be distracting. And I can hear my my father-in-law and everything. And so I came out here. I was like, I'll just pull up a truck, hit my father-in-law's truck up to the house. We'll have Wi-Fi. It'll be great. And it'll be quiet. And then, of course, as soon as I brought the truck up here, every single weed whacker and chainsaw in the neighborhood was fired up. And so I'm surprised we can't actually hear all of them. So for all of those home recording people out there, just buy a Ford F-150. The soundproofing is quite good. It's a good vocal booth.
Just park it in your apartment or wherever you podcast.
Yeah. It's a pricey vocal booth, but worth it.
I say this because now the scenery has changed, and I'm looking at this. It's just incredible. It's less a yard and more of a forest, which is, now it makes sense that there are chainsaws in the area. I'm less concerned for your safety.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is not Los Angeles. This is quite lovely. It's country. It is the country, and I adapt very quickly to this. Yesterday, I was on my father's ride. I'm such a city boy, I don't even know what it's called, but, a lawnmower that you ride.
Yeah, riding lawnmower, I think is the
riding lawnmower
term.
It's quite descriptive. And I was just filthy. I was doing yard work, and I was like, I'm just going to go to the grocery store, not going to change, haven't showered, totally fine. And, this is me adapting to being in Alpine. This is the reality. In LA, I would be ostracized from the grocery store or whatever.
I guess it depends on the grocery store. I feel like there's a lot of maybe health food, kind of hippie establishments where you might fit in.
Sure. Yeah. So how are you? Where are you in the world?
I'm in Queens, New York right now.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Base. I texted you 100 tweet long thread of what I've been dealing with for the past, I guess, like 2.5 years. Once New York opened up construction, it's basically been nonstop right across from me. You know, I do my podcast, and I was recording. A friend of mine does a NPR show, so I was recording some stuff for him. And I bring this all up because definitely at the beginning of the pandemic, people's standards for audio quality lowered considerably, you know, much to my benefit. And I think it's maintained to a certain extent. So I don't think a little bit of weed whacking in the background is the end of the world, but I'm glad that we figured out a better solution.
That's great. And I just got this mic off of Amazon because whenever I do this stuff at home, I have my own little setup, but obviously I don't have any of my gear.
I mean, obviously you're very much in the promotional phase of things right now, but when you're out in a place like that, are you still recording or songwriting at all?
Right now I'm not songwriting. I will pick up the guitar or sit at my father-in-law's piano that hasn't been tuned in 15 years and sounds like great in the most funky way. And I'll play around, and once in a while I'll fire up my recording, my note app on my voice memo app on my iPhone, but not in the writing phase. Mostly in the, oh crap, I haven't sung in like 2-3 months. My voice is probably really rusty, and I'm probably going to need to perform at least some of these songs soon. So warming up and singing, basically driving in the car, because as we've established, there's nowhere in the house that I could do this, but I'll drive around and I'll sing a lot of the album just to kind of get my voice warmed up and to also get used to the songs because they're fairly new. Some of them, you still have like, what's the lyric on the second verse? What are the lyrics? I really need to know this. So it's sort of in that phase of things. I tend to separate those things. Even if when I'm writing down ideas and stuff, I'll purposely not be trying to write lyrics or get into details around any of these simple ideas. I'm like just gathering some ideas or beginning to gather ideas, but this thing's not even out in the world yet, so I'm not good at multitasking, let's just say that. So, I'm kind of focusing on that. And to me, other songwriters and musicians are different. Everyone has their own process. But for me, writing a song just requires all of my focus. And if I'm not able to give all of my focus to it, I don't do it. And so I just figure out some melodic ideas and a few little things that I go, okay, that'll be a song, or that can be a song. But as soon as I start developing those things, it's just all encompassing, and I try to purposely separate that from when I need to focus on other things,
I will tell you, and maybe you'll take some solace in this, but as somebody who interviews I have a lot of musicians on the show, that I think that's pretty standard. And I think especially the more it turns from hobby to an actual career, and the more basically your life is dependent on putting music into the world, people really do have to essentially create work hours and set aside specific times where they shut the door and completely focus on something.
Yeah. I'm always surprised when I hear people talk about their processes. I'm not smart enough to know the difference. When when I hear people talk about it, and some people, it just comes to them and they'll write it down on a napkin, in a bar or something like that. For me, it's much more of I don't want to say struggle. The idea, usually, if something doesn't come to me quickly, I don't find it's usually not worth spending the time to develop it. So the idea and the ballpark of a thing, often it'll just show up and fall in my lap. It's really then, turning that into a finished product is a goddamn nightmare. But a necessary one, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But that's usually like just trying to find a short, syllabic, precise group of words that rhyme in order to say the exact thing I'm trying to say can be quite difficult. Sometimes not so much, but for me, for the most part, it is. I'll spend a lot of time and mental energy on it, and I often will wake up at 3 a.m. and decide that's the perfect time to think about it, and avoid sleeping.
I'm sure you're keenly aware of this as somebody who has, made his life as a comedian and actor and musician. But this is the kind of thing that you can only complain about to other musicians, because for everybody else who I'm going to say this and it's going to sound mean, and maybe it kind of is, but everyone else who works for a living, can't really you can't really complain about how difficult it is to finish a song.
Oh my God, my wife works, I would say minimum 80 hours a week, and is responsible for the lives of about 100 people at any given time. So trust me, when I walk in at the end of the day of sitting in my studio going, what rhymes with follow? And I walk in and she goes, how was your day? I go, it was great. It was great. No problem.
Would you say that music is your primary focus these days?
Yeah, I think yes. And in all forms. Right now, these days, I'm focusing on my Wolfie's Just Fine project, which is basically me being writing songs that are perhaps sincere and quote unquote serious, and not comedy songs. There is humor in them, but it's more of a serious music project, and it's my own. And for the past few years now, my main day job has been songwriting for film and television whenever someone hires me. But that's kind of been my day job. On the acting and the comedian front, I've been very, very comfortable not being in front of the camera as an actor or comedian, or on stage as a comedian. And that's not to say that I'm done with it. Who knows, but at this moment in my life, I'm really comfortable not being necessarily seen. In all the Wolfie's Just Fine videos, I'm happy to hire actors to play parts and all that stuff, and to focus on either directing it or writing it or whatnot. So, that is telling, at the end of the day, where I'm not really desiring that. And there's another side to it. I'm not Daniel Day-Lewis. I played Taco on The League because I'm pretty good at playing that role. And there was a lot of improv and all that stuff. So there's a lot of me there. But, I don't know that I'm the best person to hire in order to interpret someone's, screenplay or character. I'm pretty specific, and I don't put that much work into it. And so all that to say, I'm probably better at the songwriting thing than I am as a straight up actor. And I feel nothing at all saying that. I think that is actually very true, It's funny that you bring up Daniel Day-Lewis specifically. Obviously, that's somebody you would reach for as a example of a very good actor. But also, didn't he basically quit acting after The Phantom Thread because he really liked being in the clothing design business? Yeah, I heard that he retired, and only he can do that. Wasn't he like a cobbler in Italy or something for a while? yeah. Well, or at least, I hear stories, but
it's just funny, like, speaking of, somebody like changing careers. I mean, the finest actor of our time decided that it wasn't for him anymore. Yeah. Well,
I mean, look, when I talk about songwriting being all encompassing, that's my version of it, which is insanely easy. The way he approaches roles, or at least how I hear he approaches roles, sounds like such a nightmare that I would not. You can offer me the world, and are you 2 years of just being in character as Lincoln? No, please, no. I'd rather be a roofer in Southern California.
Part of the reason why I ask about focus is because at the top of the conversation you alluded to, I don't know, maybe this was hyperbolic, but you said that you basically hadn't sung in 2 to 3 months, and I'm wondering how somebody who is, now a professional musician could go that long without singing.
Well, I say that, but so the way that I sing normally is I'm sitting there and I'm writing and I'm playing guitar and I am singing to myself at a low volume. However, when I do actually sing either my songs or any other songs, I tend to sing I need to kind of belt a little bit. And if I haven't done that in a while, this is very boring, but my upper range gets pretty weak, and I don't have a great voice to begin with, and I'm not a trained singer, so it'll get pretty lazy pretty quickly. I would not win on the voice, particularly not when I haven't sung at full voice in a while. And that always, just because the way we live, I'm not going to start belting while either my father-in-law's in the house here, or even when we're at home. My wife has been working remotely for the past 2.5 years. So I go to my little shed in the back. That is my studio, but my neighbors can hear me if I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And so there's no real place to actually do that aside from when I was recording this album. I was in Nashville, and you're in the studio with the producer, and you're like, okay, I'm going to belt now because I actually don't care whether or not anyone can hear me, and most likely no one can because I'm in an actual studio. But I'm realizing now that it's actually really important for me to belt even louder than I'm going to sing these songs for my voice, but also it's such a great release, and it does something to the body to let out those kinds of sounds, but particularly at a high volume. So that's the part I haven't done in 2 months, and I know some of these songs require it, and I don't want to be all of a sudden on stage at Largo and I go, oh shit, I haven't actually done the high part in this song in a while, and it just sounds worse. I don't want it to sound worse than it would when my voice is all warmed up,
Yeah, you don't want the Peter Brady voice crack on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I'm staring at this beautiful backyard with all of these trees, and the first thought that crossed my mind, you're usually in Los Angeles, I'm usually in New York, and this was for me personally, this is a really hard place to ride out the pandemic for 2 years, in this 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. And I'm looking at this space and I'm thinking about the freedom that you have in a place like that to be able to sing at the top of your lungs, which you can't necessarily do in a big city. And thinking that I don't know, this looks like it would have been a pretty good place to ride out the pandemic.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. Way better than Los Angeles, or New York. New York, especially. Yeah, I don't know. The pandemic here. Well, also, I just think politically, this area, it was probably there was a pandemic maybe for a month. But also, there's so much space And I can imagine that it was easy. Because of my father-in-law's 81, of course, for that first long chunk of the pandemic, we just couldn't come down here, and then eventually the tests started becoming available and affordable. And so we would make these trips down here, and it was so good for the soul to be able to just walk around outdoors and to be surrounded by space and trees. It's a different experience, the pandemic here than it is obviously in the cities.
I was talking to a musician last night for the show, and he said that his experience of songwriting during the pandemic was, that it was difficult, and that's something I've heard a lot. Certainly, myself as a professional writer, there were times when it's very easy to be overwhelmed by everything that's happening, and you get depressed, and it's really hard to be creative when you're depressed. But the flip side, and this is a really funny thing that happened as I was interviewing people fairly early on during the pandemic, I would ask them about their experience, and then they would get really quiet, and they would basically whisper into the microphone that the pandemic was great for them. Because, nobody wants to admit that, right? Nobody wants to admit this thing that is killing millions of people is good for them. But I've noticed that it's really kind of it's really polarized among people when it comes to actually trying to be creative.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it really just, if you're doing okay financially or have some form of income in those, particularly in that first year, yes, that's, if you can work from home, who the hell would not want to work from home? But yeah, that's the whole divide. Like I always work from home, and so for me, my life didn't change. I got to see my wife a lot more, which was really lovely. I had nothing to complain about, and I was actually Hollywood basically shut down. But there were some shows that were still in production, and because I have transitioned to being primarily a songwriter in that world, I was still getting hit up for work, and I had the two projects that I worked on throughout the pandemic. One, which was The After Party, which was on Apple TV. They had a whole episode that was a musical, and that was months and months of work where I was just like sitting in my studio out back, or walking around in my neighborhood taking notes down and writing lyrics. And then I had this other Clone High, which is about to come out. I got to write a musical episode for that. So all that to say, I had friends who were just immediately out of work. And of course, I'm not going to be like, this is actually great. My life hasn't changed all that much, and I have work and some income coming in. I'm happy about that. But yeah, of course I'm going to, say it on the DL and hush, in a hushed tone. But yeah, like for me, it actually was I wasn't writing my own stuff. I was not feeling that kind of creative energy, but to have to write something for someone else's project with very specific guidelines, I was happy to do that, which is a different process. And I wasn't compelled to write my own stuff until later on at like 2021 and such. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing that happened.
It is very strange to look back and realize that we all lived through that, and that it's still very fresh. I think it's something we're going to be processing for a long time.
Well, it's also bizarre to like. So I was in the grocery store here, and there were like two employees who were just kind of like, had a cold, and they're like sneezing and coughing and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, we're actually right back to this point, like we just totally disregarded all of it. Okay, all right. Or people on planes who are I'm fine with people not wearing masks on plane, whatever. You do whatever, you do you. But if you're sick, like, I've been on planes where people are sick and coughing and aren't wearing masks. And you go, what? What you do? Huh? What's going on here?
I've had this happen a few times, but I think I was on the subway, I want to say, and somebody was just coughing without covering their mouth. And I was like, well, that, there should be some positive outcome from this. Like, that should be the bare minimum.
Yeah, that should have gone. I get it. Some people want to do the handshake. They still want to do the handshake. Fine. If you really want that, I'll give it to you. But coughing publicly without covering your mouth, I'm not sure I'm on board, As we're recording this,
we're still very much in the middle of the writer's strike right now. Has that impacted you at all?
Well, this is the thing about not really being in the industry anymore. Not really. I mean, I do this on the songwriting side. Sure, there are no productions that are going right now, and obviously, as a songwriter, I'm a writer, and I'm not. It's a different union and a whole different situation. I have tons of writer friends, and I'm just like in complete solidarity with them. It's been an insane.
I would be shocked if you said anything to the contrary.
No, I mean, it's absolute insanity what the streaming services have been able to get away with, on a lot of levels. But on the with royalties for writers in particular, it's absolute insanity. But no, it does for me. I've spent the past year and a half. Basically, I'll write, I'll do those gigs where, like, when I wrote for Clone High, it was about a 2-month gig. But otherwise, I've been spending my time writing this album, being in pre-production for it, flying to Nashville a couple times, being out there and recording this album. Great, with a wonderful human and very talented producer and arranger, Jordan Lenning. We worked on this album, I want to say for a year and a half together. And so my life's primarily been that, and then just life stuff. Life has been pretty tumultuous the past couple of years. I lost my father. Tons of just like, life things that happen around this age. My father-in-law right now is kind of, he's at that age where he needs more and more help, and that's part of life. And I have 8 brothers and sisters, and they all have kids, and I have 15 nieces and nephews. There's just a lot to occupy my time and attention. And my wife is a real person with a real job. She doesn't sit around figuring out how to rhyme things all day. And so, supporting her however I can, that's also a big part of it. So, all that to say, my life, is that mainly. So the writer's strike doesn't directly affect me, but it affects a lot of my friends.
I implicitly know the kind of the underlying response here, but how does one end up with 8 siblings?
Unprotected sexual intercourse.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at, but I feel like there might be some other less gratuitous answer.
My parents, when asked, they just kind of, there's no great answer. They're just like, they just felt, they stopped when they decided that was the right number. I guess they just kept feeling like, no, maybe there's one more.
We'll get it right next time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Ooh, this one's an artist. No, we need another. I don't know. They wanted a large family, but it doesn't, when I asked my mom about it, she doesn't seem to think it was planned. It just kind of kept happening. It's kind of like we're all of our names start with a J. And, they are also the Pentecostal, sort of in the evangelical Christian world, however Canadian. So there's a little less edge than your evangelicals.
No
down
snake
here.
handling up there?
No, there's mostly the love your neighbor kind of vibe, but you don't implicitly have to vote for someone because you're a fan of Jesus Christ. That kind of thing. But it was still, a pretty intense, environment. And so a lot of people think it's related to that. But no, they're Protestant, that they were allowed to use contraception. And they don't seem to think that the J's, everyone tends to think, because of Jesus. And they're like, no, the first three names ended up being J's, and we decided, why don't we just keep going with it? So all I have to say, it's a lot of boring answers to something that is fairly, unique these days, which is that many children from two people,
You mentioned losing her father, and that's something that I think really looms large over this record in a big way. That happening so recently, and now, being down there caring for your sister's father, is that bringing back, is that kind of reopening some of those wounds?
Well, inevitably those wounds are still just wide open. I don't know. I tend to have, I can compartmentalize my emotions quite well. And so inevitably, of course, and at the same time, it's not like directly accessible in this. And I also feel like he is also totally like okay. It's different being in the presence of someone who is going, and is going soon, and there's not much that you can do about it. There's not much that they can do about it. It's just the reality of it. And for me, and particularly, with my father's my father, it wasn't really a plan to sort of have this record be about that. It's just inevitably, that those months of being in Montreal with my father, seeing him, really, be in this place where it was fairly clear, that he wasn't going to be around for long. We didn't know, how soon or how long he'd be around before he went, but it took about, he was diagnosed probably in, I want to say April or May, and he passed January 3rd, 2022. And so to speak about the record, it started because I didn't have a plan to write a Wolf is Just Fine album or anything really. But losing my father at the funeral, I played and sang a song that I wrote for him 20 years ago. That song it's called Song for Dad. It's on the record. I wrote it as a 22-year-old. It was obviously a different dynamic between me and my father, and I kind of, it was really impossible to get through at the funeral, but I sang the song, and he always, since I'd given him a copy of that song 20 years ago, he had asked me to release it. He just kept saying, you should put this song out. It's really good. You should put this song out. It's really good. And I try to explain to him, I've been through a few different iterations as a quote unquote public figure, but I'm the guy who makes silly YouTube videos about getting stoned. And I'm also then Taco from the League. I kept trying to explain to him that me releasing a sincere song about how I Love My Dad. It's, I'm not sure how that would, be received. And then, eventually I created the Wolfie's Just Fine thing, which was just a way for me to release my own music. All that to say, I played it at the funeral, and my brother-in-law and my brother, both who are they don't speak very much. They don't say many things to me, particularly not about my music or about anything. And my brother-in-law said, that's the best song you ever wrote. And I was like very moved by that. And then my brother Jason, who just, he doesn't talk about, any of this kind. We discuss wrestling and sports together, and, and we, all that kind of stuff. But he was like, that song, I think that's a really good song, and I think people could, relate to it. And it's, he said all these really lovely things about it. And so and then my wife said, you know what, you could release it, you could re-record it and release it for Father's Day. This is in January, and Father's Day is in June. And that made so much sense to me, and I really just, I knew would make my father incredibly happy for me to do that. And so the decision was made to do that. And then I didn't know how I would record it, if I'd release the old version or what I was going to do. That was the plan. And so, long story short, maybe a few weeks later, I'm at my mother's house where, the whole family, we're just trying to help my mother get her footing. They've been together for 50 years. She's, obviously, and this is a pretty rough window, and so we're all there trying to help in every way that we can. And I'm just taking a bathroom break, scrolling through Instagram, and, I land on, Matt Berninger's page, and he just has this 15-second clip of a song. He says, I recorded this duet with this artist. I didn't know her, Caroline Spence. Listen to it. It's out now. And I just the little snippet was intriguing enough to me for me to go listen to the song. And it immediately, I was like, okay, whoever did the arrangement on this, whoever produced it, I'm so curious, because whoever did this, first of all, it's super cinematic. And this person gets emotion, and you can just tell, in the production itself and the arrangement. And so I kind of Googled it, and on All Music, eventually I was able to kind of find this guy, Jordan Lenning, who, to my surprise, he did the arrangement, the string arrangement. He produced it, mixed it, and then played half the instruments. And I just was like, well, I need this person in my life. And I don't know who they are. I don't know where he is in the world. I found his email somewhere. I can't even remember where. Sent him a cold email, kind of was explain the situation. I talked about the song for my father. And I was like, and maybe we can turn it into an EP if I have other song ideas. But the main thing is to record this song for my father. And I love what you've done here. And he's also, once I started Googling him, he does film scores, which hence the cinematic vibe. He did this film score for this movie Old Henry, which I absolutely love. It's one of the best modern westerns I've seen in a while, and it's very sparse, very eerie score. And so immediately I was just like, okay, I want you to do it. Are you into it? I sent him some of the music I've recorded in the past as Wolfie's Just Fine. He was into it. We had a phone call. I booked an Airbnb in Nashville, in East Nashville, close to where his studio is. And I just went out there. Well, let me rewind a little bit. And then then the songs started pouring out, having that date on the calendar, knowing that we were going to record the song for my father. All of a sudden, I just kept writing song after song, sending them to him, being like, well, we can pick and choose which songs we want to do on this EP, whether it's like 3 songs or a 5-song EP. But I kept sending him songs, and he was like, I really like this. I think we should record it. And I was, one after the next. And then eventually he was just like, is this an LP? Is this a full record maybe? Do you think? And I was like, I don't know. Do we have time to focus on a full record? How long is that going to take? He's like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that stuff. Just if we have a record here, we should make a record. And so eventually I had 10 songs, and I flew out to Nashville like maybe 3 months later to do the first round of tracking. But all of that because that it was all surrounding the idea of re-recording this song for my father. And then inevitably all the songs in some way or another, even if it's not directly, are somehow about some form of grief, some form of transition, some form of death, and hopefully in the end, the celebration of this very temporary moment we have here as beings that are alive in space and time. That inevitably that's just all in there, consciously or not. And then the last song not the last song I wrote, one of the first songs I wrote, which was maybe a month after my father passed, was the last song on the record, which is called When You Go. And that one is just kind of about what I was talking about earlier, which is that moment when you just know the person's going. You can't ask them to stay. They know they're going. You're in this little window where there's nothing really to say to each other, and the only thing I could think to say is, I'm going to be sad when you're gone. That's it. And that song I recorded a demo for, which for me, I know that I am still Taco, and I still do comedy, and so I sent that, just this raw demo, so my voice is cracking because I can barely get through this song. I sent it to Jordan, and I'm like, look, this is uncomfortably sincere for me, but this just came out like real fast, and it's true. I don't know if it needs to be on this album or not, but it's pretty uncomfortable for me to share something like this. And so I sent it to him, and he said, F you for making me cry. I hate crying, and you have to record this song. And so, that's, we knew that would be the last song on the album. And then the first song would be Everyone Is Dead Except Us. And then everything in between, we would figure it out. But that kind of gave a structure to the album. But yeah, I mean, hey, people dying sucks, in the end, there's not much more to it. There's nothing to do about it. It sucks.
When Eric emailed me to suggest an interview with you, he said, you might remember him as Taco. And I said, yes, of course I remember him as Taco. And I remember his hit song about Yobagoya. That is a big hurdle, right? I mean, I know, like, for me as a listener, the first time, having first learned about you through that show and knowing about your comedy, there's almost this sort of weird, uncanny moment of recognizing your voice as a comedy voice, and then having to go through this adjustment to hear you singing these songs. Is earnestness something that doesn't come easy for you? Is it more difficult than doing the funny stuff?
Publicly, yes. In my life, I think most people who know me as a pretty boring, quiet guy can lighten up a little bit, you know? But publicly, yes, it is more difficult. Less so now, you know. I'm 42, and I'm actually getting to the place in my life where I'm like, I think it's interesting to do different things, and to be radically sincere, and then also write a silly song here and there, and to write these silly self-aware music. And for a show like Clone High, like, I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's probably a little jarring, and that's totally fine. And when I started doing the Wolfie's Just Fine stuff, I avoided releasing quote unquote serious music for so long because I was like the trope of the actor who has a band, you know, like Jared Leto, even the Billy Bob Thornton, like all these, you know, people who are like, and they have a band. I was maybe even too aware of that. And so I really avoided that for a very long time. And then eventually I was like, well, if it's not my name and if I'm not in the videos, it might help people to hear the song and then find out it's me, you know, because I'm not, you know, delusional. I know that if Will Ferrell released an album, I would hear Will Ferrell's voice. And even if it were great, it could be Abbey Road. You'd be like, I don't know, man. I can't, I just kind of want to laugh the whole time because it's Will Ferrell, you know? So I get it, you know, I knew the entire time, and I even know with this album in particular, because this one is uncomfortably sincere in moments. It's totally fine if some people are like, I just can't listen to Taco sing about this stuff or be this serious. Hopefully on the album there are songs that don't come across as that self-serious. You know, I have a song about being good at Mortal Kombat 2 and a song about watching Hulk Hogan slam Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. Inevitably there's humor in all of it, and it's me. You know, I'm not doing an impression of Tom York when I'm working under Wolfie's Just Fine. It's still me. But I also get, you know, if I post a video on my YouTube channel, Wolfie's Just Fine video, you know, often there will be, like surprise of like, you know, oh wow, you're good at doing this kind of thing. I mean, that's like the best case scenario. But inevitably, 50% of it is like, Everyday Normal Guy 3. Come on, we want an Everyday Normal Guy 3. We get it. We get it. You can write serious music. We don't care. And that's totally fine. You know, I get it. I get it. Like, again, you know, I always try to think of like, if Will Ferrell released a great album, would I care? I don't know that I would. And so for me, it's always been the best case scenario is someone hears something by Wolfie's Just Fine, Shazams it, and saves it without knowing anything. And then eventually down the road, they go, oh shit, it's that guy. Just to hopefully help them hear the music first. I mean, that's why I'm not, there's no picture of me anywhere.
And it's not your name. And
it's not my name, all that stuff, just because I want, whether or not people will like the music that I'm making, I don't know, but I want to give the people who would enjoy it, even if there are very few people, to give them the best chance to just listen to it on its own merits and then go, oh, yo, Taco did that. That's weird, you know?
I know this is sort of an overused term these days, but I wonder if there is ultimately an element of imposter syndrome in that, you know, obviously there's a one level of earnestness being difficult, and it can be for anybody. I mean, even if they're not a professional comedian, it's hard to really bare your soul. But at a certain point, do you start to internalize that, and do you start to doubt your your own abilities to be serious because of this other life that you lead?
Well, the good news is I've had imposter syndrome in every every version of my creative path, particularly as a comedian, and as a musician, I direct all of the Wolfie's Just Fine videos as a director, as a writer, as a guy who writes. My God, I was put in charge of writing all of the songs for the Lego Movie 2. It wasn't planned. I just kept writing songs and they wanted me to continue. And eventually they were like, well, you're the guy. And I was like, are you out of your mind? I've never done this before. You're putting it all on me, so that happens with everything. I think with the thing that has changed for me, and obviously it has a lot to do with like losing my father and those big moments where you do realize we're just here for who knows how long. And it's directly in front of you, and emotionally you're end up being so connected to what's important and what is not. And in that grief and in that sort of in the face of my own mortality, you end up going, oh, just do whatever you feel like you should do, because there's who am I going to make anything for if it's not that's something that feels true to me,
I appreciate the Zen approach, and I know that that's an overarching theme on this record. But I know for me personally, you hear this stuff and you recognize on it something like, we have a limited amount of time on Earth and let's enjoy it. You recognize that it's true on its face, but that doesn't make it easy to accept, and it doesn't make it easy to carry out your life according to those rules. Is that kind of thing something that comes naturally to you?
I think that comes for me. No. I've been a anxious wreck my entire life, and so worried about how people perceive me. But I think that's just being. I don't know, being 42 and being being a big part of quote unquote not feeling like I'm like cool, like not in like a bad way, not in a good way, but just being like, oh no, it's not my responsibility to have this other thing that I've kind of wanted or had at certain moments in my life. That's not that. There are tons of people of all ages who are really awesome, and even me just using the word cool is uncool. But just being like, oh yeah, that's not. I don't have to worry about that anymore. For some reason, I'm at a point in my life. I'm married. I'm 42. I've kind of done a lot, and a lot of different things that were. Some were a little more in the sort of cool factor, public, whatever. And right now in my life, I'm like, I'm not cool. I'm a 42-year-old dude who writes songs about being good at Mortal Kombat when I'm 13. If I let go of anything, any attempt to be, because I'm old, I'll say Tom York. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, this is actually quite nice to be in this place, for better or worse. I'm not saying that's, there's probably something lost along the way in that. But, I've spent a lot of time worrying about that. And just for some reason in the past, well, I won't say for some reason, because of life and age, all of a sudden I let that go, and you just, the true challenge then becomes, well, if I'm not trying to make something that's like cool or innovative or something that's going to like blow people's minds what am I trying to do? Why am I making anything? And in the end, for me, it's, I don't know what that is, but if something kind of just, it shows up and I feel like it represents something a question I'm asking or a struggle I'm having or something that I'm processing and it feels true. And by the end of the process of recording it and it being a complete thing, I can sit back and go, yeah, that represents something that I've been hashing out in this moment in my life. And I like the way that it sounds. It accurately sounds like that thing that is very present in my life right now. That's as much as I can do. And because, I'm going to say that while also acknowledging it makes me sound way more zen than I am, that when I put out this album, if 3 people listen to it and most people are like, it's not my favorite album, it's going to crush me. And then I'll try my best over the next 2 years to become super cool and hip again,
I noticed in the press material, it might have been the stuff that Eric sent me. It was talking a little bit about Taoism, and I'm wondering how that fits into all of this.
Oh, interesting. Oh, Jesus. That makes me sound like an authority on it.
It's more a question of, because we're talking about coping with grief and we're talking about learning to appreciate things in the moment. I know Zen is connected to Buddhism, but we're talking about being Zen. It seems to me that Taoism for you would or should have a function in all of those things.
Would I? Well, I will say this. My father, Paul-Émile Lajoie, or I say Lajoie because that's how we pronounce it in Quebec, but everyone else pronounces it Lajoie, so I've shifted the pronunciation, funny enough. But Paul-Émile Lajoie, who's French-Canadian, he taught me a lot of things, and there are a lot of him and his beliefs, even though our beliefs differ in the specificity of, was quite evangelical Christian based. He lived his life like he would try to do as much good in the ways that he could control, in his community, in his family, with his friends, and on a societal level to a certain extent. But anything that he could directly affect and be helpful with and show, and people that he could show love to, he was all about it and spent a lot of time thinking, caring about that and those people. And the stuff that he could not, which mainly would end up being those bigger societal questions like, politics and the future of humanity, to say the least. I don't know, for better or worse, there was this feeling from him on those big questions, but also there were things that he just could not, there's no way to control. And he seemed completely fine about that. Be like, we would have these conversations. Sometimes I'd be like, in my head about something and trying to explain to him a problem I'm having. And he would just kind of go, oh, don't worry about that. That'll pass. Or oh, I get it. That's complicated. And just like not say anything else. Just kind of like have this knowing vibe that, that's actually not productive to spend your time on. In the meantime, hey, the neighbor's going through some shit. Can you bring over this soup, And so I think I got a little bit of that from my father. Inevitably, there's a Taoism to that, which is, life and the universe is happening whether you like it or not. Are you going to swim against the stream, or are you going to put your feet up and float with the stream and do what you can as you float? Avoid some rocks, maybe paddle to the left a little bit once in a while and to the right. But the stream's going, and it is counterproductive to swim against the stream. And you can always feel that. I mean, I feel that when I'm in my most, I fucking hate everything that I'm saying right now, but when I'm like the most spiritually grounded, when I'm in that place and it's so clear the thing that I'm supposed to focus on and the stuff that is fluff that I should really let go of, because there's no point in spending time in my life as the person that I am, focusing energy on those things. It's always clear. I think we all have our own way of having that sort of internal GPS. For some weird reason, I'll be like, yeah, there's something to this writing about my own experience as a kid watching Hulk Hogan slam Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 at my grandmother's house, watching it on television. It's important for me to write about that and to write about the joy that is accessible to children, that was accessible to me, that is no longer accessible to me. And I long for that. There's a grief related to not being able to feel that kind of emotional euphoria around anything in life, let alone watching two grown men in spandex pretend to duke it out. But for some reason, like if I were to follow my intuition, that's a thing that feels correct to me. My intuition always, like with my wife and our relationship, that's clear. There are so many, the important things in my life. I kind of know when I'm grounded and when I should be doing something or shouldn't. And it's not a religious thing. I don't know. And as I'm talking, I'm immediately judging everything that I'm saying. And I'm like, you fucking idiot. What are you even talking about? Is what's happening in my head. And I know that's not, that's not my intuition. That is my self judgment. That is never too far away.